everyone, and welcome to Go-to-Market AI, the future of your go-to-market tech stack. I'm your host, Sarah McConnell. These days, it seems like every company has AI, but on this show, we want to go a level deeper so you can see firsthand how businesses are actually applying AI to solve your business challenges. We're going to go deep into the use cases and showing you live demos of the latest and greatest in AI technology. Today, I'm joined by Kristin Swindle, Manager of Enterprise Sales Engineering at Salesloft. Kristin, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about today.
Awesome. So first thing, can you tell us a little bit about who is Salesloft? What do you guys do? And then who do you guys help?
Yeah, so Salesloft is an AI-powered sales engagement platform where we're actually serving every member of the revenue team. So you can build pipeline, close more deals, coach your reps to success. But ultimately, it's to better serve your customers. What I think is really interesting is historically, I feel like sales engagement has gotten this reputation of just being focused on prospecting or the SDR motion. And while that is definitely very important still, sales have really wanted to focus on getting out of the mold and kind of breaking the mold there, which is why we introduced Rhythm in July, which we'll talk about today. That's kind of you'll hear me say it a lot, the nucleus of our AI. So by leveraging that AI and Rhythm, we've seen a significant increase in the impact for our AEs and our other revenue teams, including our SDRs, by having that buyer behavior turned into seller action from all the signals with the tech stack. So it's really helped them focus on the right prospects, the right accounts at the right time to get to those outcomes. And we're already hearing such an impact of, sellers saying they're getting more meetings with less or the same amount of activity. So really pumped about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know I'm really excited to see your demo for them because I've heard a ton about it. I feel like when you guys launched it back in June, did you say it was June? I remember July. Okay, I remember just seeing a ton of news about it in my LinkedIn feed. So I'm really excited to see the demo. And also because you touched on a very good point, which is the impetus of this show was we're hearing a lot about AI and how you kind of mentioned it. It's making sellers and go-to-market teams better at their jobs with less of an effort. And I think seeing that in action during the demo just makes it come to life. It really starts to connect the dots of like, okay, this is going to make me better at my job with less time, but how and what does that look like? So that being said, I would love to transition into a demo so you can show us Salesloft's AI functionality, especially Salesloft Rhythm.
Yeah, so what you'll see in the demonstration today is that we have weaved AI throughout the entire Salesloft platform, from the administrative side to the workflow side to managing opportunities and forecasts and to the data and analytics. So I do want to start at the beginning as we think about where our customers start their journey, which is usually the configuration, building out the processes and the content. So one big piece of AI we introduced was our generative AI with our email templates that really focus on helping to draft email templates for more of those high volume outbound motions. You'll see here I put in some inputs as far as the role type I'm going after, my company name, and any sort of inputs. I just did a write-up on Salesloft, but this could be value propositions. And then finally, what do I want that call to action to be? So as I'm generating this is actually going to give me 3 different options that I can choose from to either utilize as is, or if I want to make any changes to this, I can obviously make any adjustments to fit my business or change up the language. But really the goal with that was to give a foundation to help ramp our teams quicker and make sure they're starting with some powerful messaging straight out of the gate.
I really like this. I think something we've seen a lot with generative AI and what I love that you've built into Salesloft is the prompt assist, is that there's already pre-filled text options that you just have to plug in. So it helps, one, I think, reps with prompting. And this is the first time I've seen it spits out 3 different options, which I love. So it's not just one thing that you have to edit. You can go through 3 and kind of mix and match or see what really fits your tone. So giving 3 options, I think, is really, really interesting.
Yeah, we wanted it to be guided, but to your point with having some flexibility there with some options to choose from was definitely our goal to make sure we're matching as closely to give you more of that foundation that you're after.
Very cool. Very cool.
So this is really where a lot of it begins, right? Is we're focusing on the processes, we're pulling in the content. And then once we have that, then that's where we start having the reps pull people in, start engaging with them through the workflow. So I want to transition over to the workflow side of things. And before I get into Rhythm, which you've heard a lot about, and really, again, our center of the AI here, one thing that we introduced was having what we call focus zones, because, kind of talking about the content, we want to make sure we have that flexibility with how people like to approach their day. So we still have more of what we're calling our structured workflows So maybe focusing in on my cadences for those kind of predefined processes to reach some sort of end goal that I'm after, prospecting, renewal, whatever it may be. And then my close, which is really, it's into quarter. I want to be hyper-focused on just the opportunities themselves. And then finally, that's where we have rhythm come into play, which is more of that unstructured workflow where, as we talked about, it's really bringing in all of the signals of the ecosystem and pulling it into a prioritized workflow here.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more around what is making up rhythm, what is feeding it, how is it prioritizing? So what we've done is we wanted to make sure we were looking at as many different signals as possible to prevent all that different swivel chairing. So we pulled one of the main things that I think a lot of our teams have been excited about is third-party integrations, taking advantage of the tech stack you already have. So you'll see DocuSign in here, G2, Vidyard, Seismic, HighSpot. There's tons of others that we have now and that we're rolling out through the end of this year and beyond. Our goal is really to kind of open that up down the road to have more signals ingested. And then on top of that, we're also looking at your CRM information. So looking at some of the opportunity information you have. We're also going to be looking at your buyer engagement, who's taking action on your emails, or what kind of engagement are you having? And also the seller activity, right? I have a meeting coming up, or I just wrapped a meeting and I need to be prompted for a really thorough follow-up. And what it's doing is AI is looking at the op information like you see here and the buyer engagement, and it's ranking those due actions based off of the immediacy and the impact and prioritizing them on the likelihood for me to get a booked meeting, an opened opportunity, as well as that deal importance. And I think what's really critical to call out here that Salesloft focuses in on is making sure we have that explainability in the workflow. So as we're hovering over maybe this opportunity, this is letting me know the key factors that our Conductor AI used to prioritize this at the top, from our deal engagement score, which we'll talk more about, the ARR, the close date, and then similar with that, with the buyer side of things. Why is Dylan at the top of our priority list from a buyer engagement perspective? So I'll have all of that insight pulling in here, and this really ultimately helps the reps prioritize their due activities to help them book more meetings and close more of those deals faster.
That's very cool. I think two things here I really, really love seeing is one, I think the use case I immediately think of with Salesloft and Rhythm in particular is, you mentioned earlier, reps, is this helps SDRs, but I have to imagine there's such a good use case here for ops, like a sales ops team, revenue ops, where I'm like, oh, you don't need to build this in dashboards anymore. You don't have to go into multiple systems to have these dashboards of prioritization. It just exists in the system that you're already spending a lot of your time outbounding in. So I feel like this has to save a lot of time, not only for reps, but for the ops teams that are helping build normally the dashboards that they would need from a prioritization standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I really do, I've not seen the ability to hover and see why something is prioritized. Like, I think AI is very cool and it's like, okay, I know it's helping me be better and faster, but to be able to see why it sort of unveils, like, okay, yes, AI is telling me that I should follow with Dylan now, but if I'm like, I don't know why, like, I'm just not, I can double in and see like, okay, it does make sense. So unveiling a little bit more behind the why AI is telling you to do that is very interesting.
Yeah, I think another thing too is when you were talking about the RevOps, one thing that I particularly seen as kind of feedback is that we think about, the buzz is like tech consolidation, right? And I think a lot of times when we think about tech consolidation, sometimes it's not necessarily removing something from the tech stack, which does play into that. But to your point, I think it's like, let's go ahead and take advantage of the tech stack you do have. So you do have that adoption. I think that's another piece that ops really likes is we've bought these tools. I want to make sure my team's adopting it. And this prevents me from needing to jump to those different tabs to take advantage of all those different signals.
Yeah. And I have to imagine even the hover and telling you why has to help with adoption. Like, I know as a human, if I am understanding the why behind it, why you're telling me to prioritize one deal over the other or one contact over the other, that's going to help me from an adoption standpoint because I trust it. I trust it a little bit more, I understand why it's asking me to do something or why I am doing something. So I have to, your team did a really good job here, I think, from building in features from an AI perspective that are going to help with adoption, which is great.
Love to hear that. And so will our product team. And the other thing too that I think is nice about this as you're looking at the why and that prioritization is it's doing it real time. So as things are happening, it's constantly adjusting that prioritization. Yeah. So I want to show you what it looks like to kind of action upon some of these different things, specifically in the rhythm flow here. So one that I know has been a huge kind of value add for our teams, we've heard a lot about, and this will start introducing some of our conversation AI that we have, is the meeting follow-up or the meeting reminder. So let's just say I've already had this meeting with this particular op, and based off of the prioritization, this is letting me know I should go ahead and send that follow-up to them right away. So when I go to click to action this, those that are maybe already familiar with Salesloft and kind of using just the cadencing functionality previously, we still wanted to keep that same sidebar experience. But again, this is now looking at everything across the ecosystem and prioritizing that. So you see it's pulled up my template here. I have my opportunity to reference in case I want to personalize further. But I specifically want to talk about where we're pulling this from. So this is where we'll expand a bit into our conversations here and get an understanding of what AI capabilities we have there. So right now that is located in our, I'll tab this down, our recap section. So we have two main areas here. We have our summary and we have those action items. So the AI is providing all of this information, and then we have automation to automatically pull those action items into this template. So one, it's making those follow-ups really seamless and making the rep more efficient. But two, where I really think a lot of this adds value is thinking about collaboration with either handing off to other teams, or maybe as a manager, you don't have the time to be everywhere at once. So this kind of allows you like a real quick glimpse into how did this go and what is the expectation of what my team is supposed to deliver on as a follow-up. So it can be really impactful from that point of view.
Yeah, I do. I love the use case of AI for like summary, because I do think there is a great use case for any managers who have larger teams where it's hard to scroll through things. It's hard to digest through all this information. You're already so busy as it is. I think using like generative AI to have that recap is so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just, as we talk about productivity and efficiency, the more things that you have that can help just say, I can focus on the selling part, right? And more of that human aspect, the better.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, let's show it from, we looked more from the opportunity perspective. So I'd love to show you what it looks like for maybe that Dylan person we saw earlier. And we have this prompt for the call. So you'll see it's kind of changing my environment based off of what that action is. So I have my call now prompting. Now it's been replaced with a profile. And there's a lot of information. I won't dig into everything that we have here, but there's a lot of ways that we can manage our contacts in less time and using the AI to make those tasks effortless. So as I'm thinking about preparing for this call, some things that we'll have in here is we'll have out of office detection. So if they're prompted to be on my cadence, it'll actually automatically move the due date based off of when they're back in the office.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. We also have some job seniority, which kind of does a macro job title. So as we're thinking about that messaging we saw earlier, we can make sure we're aligning it at more of that macro parent level to have that consistency. And then we also have some other things like data enrichment, which is pulling from the person's signature and enhancing the data that we have. So we always have the most up-to-date information. And then finally, as we're thinking about, I'm ready to engage with Dylan now that I have this other insight, we're also going to be able to showcase email sentiment, not only in here, but also in our analytics. So you kind of know, how should I be approaching this conversation? Has it been positive as of late? Am I getting some objections? So it really helps from a strategic point of view.
Oh, that's super interesting. I do really like the sentiment aspect of it. I think especially if time has passed after a call, you might even forget what the sentiment was. So having that sort of automated and AI helping me understand, like, do I need to approach this deal with a little bit more finesse? Is it something where they're like really gung-ho and we know we can push this forward quicker? That would be, I can see where that's really useful for a seller.
Yeah. And the other piece too is, as I mentioned, it pulls into the analytics. So maybe for that particular seller and that particular relationship, but I can see how that's trending across my team to see, are there themes? We're getting a lot of objections, or maybe this individual as a whole is getting a lot of positive interactions or objections. So it really kind of helps to hone in from a coaching perspective too. At that more
see from a manager's perspective, being able to look at rep level and say like, hey, are there really common trends with this rep where like there's negative sentiment, or we're not seeing like next actions in all of their calls, and being able to use that. And then even to what you just showed right before this, going into the calls themselves and having a recap would help so much from like a coaching perspective, a manager perspective. You can just get that data so much faster and hopefully catch on to any like negative trends that are happening and address them sooner before it makes a larger impact. So that's great.
That is actually a amazing segue to the next piece of the AI, because just like you're mentioning,
for listeners.
Yeah, no. This is the whole goal here is that this is where we're sending emails, making dials, things along those lines. That we're doing all of those to drive to the outcomes. But particularly to your point, that's really where we can start kind of providing some insight to leaders. Because as we think about the outcomes that they're driving towards, you have your goal, you have an idea if you're working towards that goal. But what I think is really critical is being able to have more of that objective insight into like, how is this truly trending? So as we think about all that information we just talked about earlier, helping managers, this is kind of a pulse point, right? Of how am I trending towards those overarching things I'm trying to accomplish. So for example, I'm in our outcomes dashboard, but you'll also see this in our deals as well. But you'll see I have meetings booked, opportunities created, and closed won. And each of these have not only a goal, they have what I've achieved, but you'll see we now have this projected piece in there. So that is actually looking at the expected result of this particular outcome if I continue that same daily effort through the rest of the current period I'm looking at. So this really helps, to your point, to kind of catch early on any trends of like, am I trending positively towards my goal? And if I'm not, I can see that earlier on and start to focus in that area of like, let me dig into my opportunities in this example and kind of take that a step further to see if I can get this back on track and more towards the goal we're trying to work towards.
Yeah, this is really cool. And that I know we talked about like the manager use case here, but I'm circling all the way back to, I feel like ops. Like I think about our sales ops and then the team trying to forecast constantly of like, where are we standing and what is the outcome going to be? And it's like constant work for them to have to do this in Excel to be able to have in the back end of a system that you're already using, using AI to forecast these things and tell you, hey, you might be coming up short or you're doing really well, and not have to have that constant burden on ops just frees them up to do other more important things.
Absolutely. And that's really what we're aiming to do is as we think about, all the various teams, like it's not just the efficiency in the workflow, it's making sure we're having the efficiency from the data, from the focus on a coaching standpoint, from a focus on what you need to dive into strategically without needing to kind of, to your point, use all these spreadsheets to determine where that focus should be.
That's awesome.
So let's take it up of this one where, I'm looking at, again, these opportunities that are closed won. So this is a nice transition into our opportunity management and our forecasting piece. So I'm in our deals component here, and this is our pipeline view that's pulling in all the opportunities that a rep is working. I have tons of different filters and things I can do in here, but staying with our AI vein that I want to hone in on is we do have something called a deal engagement score. So this is the AI is providing insight at the likelihood for this deal to end as a closed one based off of recency, frequency, progression, and engagement of the buying committee that I'm working with. So this is a great way to remove that subjectivity and truly kind of pressure test if this is really going to close. And it's also a really great way for not only sellers, but managers to prioritize where their focus should be as they're trying to get things to hit that goal that we showed earlier in our outcomes here.
I really like this scoring. It's so relevant because I was just talking to someone on our sales team and they were talking about like when something's in commit versus best case. And my question, I was like, well, what's the threshold? Like when does something move? And they're like, gut feeling. I guess sometimes it's just like I open a prayer and they're just like moving from commit to best case. To have a score that's telling you, it just takes that pressure off the rep of having to, like, I'm going to say this is in commit or in best case, but then you have this score to like gut check it and say like, hey, based on the engagement of this op, we think this should be in commit, or alternatively, like you're committing this, but like based on this engagement score, does it feel like this deal has progressed far enough and it's at risk? Just like a nice other data point that you're not relying on kind of human subjectivity on where it's at.
Absolutely. And, that's a good point you bring up. I think that's still important, right? Is like you've been in the conversations, you have the relationship, but it does help to kind of balance that. Like you still want that rep insight, but to your point, you said it perfectly. It's a gut check, right? Like, I think it's going well, but this is not lining up. So maybe let's dig into why it's not lining up. And again, start working to kind of strategize to get ahead of potential things that are indicating that it might not land where we want it to. Now, when we talk about explainability, that's also something we offer with the deal engagement score, is when I dig deeper into this opportunity, I have the deal sites that show me why it's been scored the way that it has. So to your point, I can kind of have oh, well, I have had conversations, or I have been doing this, I have not been doing this, which we know that does impact that likelihood for it to close. So it just really helps to be a bit more prescriptive of where that focus should be. And whether that be from the manager coaching their rep, or the rep seeing this themselves, it kind of gives them some guidance of saying, okay, well, maybe I should reach out to my current stakeholders about some of these things going on. And then something else that Salesloft will do is it will actually recommend suggested stakeholders based off of people you've already been engaging with in Salesloft. So you can make sure that you're having like a comprehensive look into the opportunity and the entire buying committee, and really where everybody fits in that buyer cycle. So nothing's falling through the cracks here.
This part is really cool. I feel like using sort of like a recommendation AI, especially as buying committees have gotten so much either bigger or they're changed. Like I know we're hearing from sales all the time that the buying committee isn't what it used to be. There's more people. They have different use cases. Having a system in the back end that's learning this as you have more opportunities and digesting that information, and then being able to say like, hey, you're missing this person in your deal. You haven't engaged with this person. I think it's so useful as times are changing so quickly. Like things have just changed so fast. Having AI on the back end to help keep up with that, this is so useful.
Yeah, I think even keeping up with them, like pulling them all in. But I think it's also, you can kind of see if interactions are trending one way or another with the individuals too. Like, hey, this is supposed to be my champion, but they dropped off, or this is my decision maker. And you can kind of see as I hover over it, it disappears. But right above, you can kind of see meetings or calls I've had, or whatever it is. So it allows you to kind of get that really granular focus on those stakeholders as well.
Very cool.
So really, I wanted to start with the pipeline, because the importance of having this up to date and really make sure that you're aligned with all the notes and what's going on is critical, because that is ultimately what is feeding our forecast here. We're ingesting that opportunity information to really kind of align those numbers that we're using to make our call. So there's a lot of insight in here from a forecasting perspective that you can utilize. But the one that in particular I want to focus in on is, hence the name, our AI forecast. And this is actually using the AI to score the probability of a deal being a closed one during this current quarter based off of how similar ones have behaved in the past that you've had. So when you think about forecasting, is one of the most difficult things to do and getting it right. So by having this come into play, and like that gut check we talked about earlier and removing the finger in the air, I do have some triangulation metrics. So this is a really nice insert here just to make sure that, again, I have a more subjective metric in the triangulation. So I'm feeling really confident in whatever call that I'm making on my forecast.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that you saw that we really focused on making sure that AI is, again, weave through all out the platform, but it's small ways as well as in large ways, because ultimately we want to make sure that this is all helping to get to whatever outcomes you're trying to achieve, but making sure it's in the most impactful and efficient manner that you possibly can.
Yeah, this was great. I really appreciated this demo, Kristin, a lot, because you mentioned at the very beginning of the call, I think sometimes there's a perception that Salesloft is like for SDR teams to prospect, which obviously it is. And you guys have AI functionality like that generative AI email builder that's going to help them. But being able to see it all the way through and see how it's managing entire deal cycles, I knew based on what I'd heard that you guys had some really cool AI stuff for like the entire sales process. So it was great to see it in action, and I appreciate you showing it to us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for letting me spend the time to show y'all.
Yeah, so with that being said, demo is wrapped. I want to move into our lightning round Q&A. So Kristin, I have a couple questions for you if you're ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the first is, how long have you guys been building AI into Salesloft?
Yeah, so we've actually been building AI in the platform for years. 2018 is when we introduced Hot Leads, which I should have showed you the demo, but it's basically using scoring through the email interactions and the live website tracking to provide notifications that, hey, you have a hand raiser, you're more likely to get a meeting with them. Go ahead and give them a call. But as we think about just any AI that we're introducing into the platform, we've always thought about jobs to be done, right? So how does AI help a user do what they need to do to be successful in their job? How do we see better outcomes? But I think the most important thing as we think about, all the AI that we've built and we're building is that we always want it rooted around value, explainability in the workflow like you saw earlier, but most importantly, that we're grounding it in the AI ethics and responsibility. That's critical to us.
That's awesome. You guys have been thinking about it for a while. And I think with the explosion in popularity as of late, but you guys have been thinking about it for a long time, and that it sounds like you're a step ahead of the game and you're thinking about this ethically from a use case perspective. So that's amazing to hear.
Yeah.
And then Kristin, what you showed today in the demo with Salesloft Rhythm, is this generally available now for customers?
Yes. Everything that we have shown is GA right now to all of our customers.
Awesome. And speaking of customers, who are a few of your customers that are benefiting from Salesloft's AI functionality?
Yeah, we have a ton of different customers. As I said, we've had AI for a while in all these kind of little or large places. But I would say, when it comes to Rhythm, which is that main release, again, we had in July, all of our Salesloft customers are now on the Rhythm experience using that Conductor AI. And the crazy thing is, I kind of talked about getting the meetings with more with less or the same activities. But we've already been hearing improvements from sellers across saying that they're seeing a 20% decrease in their sales cycle. They're seeing a 25% increase in their close when ops. And we even had we've had a bunch of different quotes, but one of them in particular, Moody's Analytics rep said, cadence equals prospecting, rhythm equals making money. And I thought that was a really nice way to think about why we focus on rhythm is again, it being outcome driven and prioritizing those things to do so.
Totally. So if you're a Salesloft customer, you're benefiting from AI. It's been in the product for a long time. You have access to it. You're going to get the benefits.
Yes, exactly.
And then Kristin, what is next in your AI roadmap at Salesloft?
Yeah, so we just announced our vision for the future at our Sales Love on tour in London. And really, it's connecting the data insights to actions in the platform. So again, thinking about Rhythm, that created an action engine, which was that better AI-powered workflow, more for those individual contributors like our SDRs, our AEs, our customer-facing teams. But where we're really starting to pivot and hone our focus as we look ahead is an insights engine that empowers the middle line to look at our sales managers so they can better use the data to impact their team. So to give you an example, let's say that the data shows that when there's less than 4 stakeholders on a deal, there's a 30% lower win rate. So the AI could then suggest, hey, with these calls you have coming up that have less than 4 stakeholders, we recommend you add these particular stakeholders to increase that likelihood. Or, maybe the rep is bringing up budget or a discount in a budget conversation. And maybe the data is showing that his pricing is usually 12% lower. So the AI could then recommend for him to get a refresher enablement training on pricing and discounting in general. So really the next evolution is taking that data set of that buyer-seller interaction we were talking about across the ecosystem, the resulting outcomes that we're getting, and really understanding what's driving those outcomes. But I think the critical part here as we think about that evolution is that this really only works if our sellers are behaving in the right way to get that meaningful insight, because if they're doing the wrong things, that insight's not going to be very meaningful. So that's where Rhythm is really coming to play, kind of being the catalyst, is because it's guiding the sellers to have the consistent good behavior that we want, that's enabling that insight to determine what works, which is then being fed back into Rhythm.
That's amazing. And then last question, Kristin, are there any other AI-powered products that your go-to-market team is using that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, so I think what a lot of people are using, we definitely use ChatGPT a lot as a brainstorming partner. I've seen our teams use it as, maybe revamping some discovery questions, or maybe even honing it further based off of persona and maybe how you can reframe things there, or maybe even getting further insight into specific personas in specific industries. So that's really helped to provide some granularity there as we're thinking about the discovery side and continuing that. I know a few have also used Perplexity to help summarize, like we use 10Ks and really trying to grab those key items, again, as we're coming with a strong point of view as to how we're going to benefit them. That's been a really big one to kind of help with the efficiency. And then, some tools to help beef up the emails. We showed our generative AI, but I think there's some really great partners like Lavender that uses AI to kind of recommend how you can tweak and clean it up further to make sure, again, you're having most impactful email. So you have the data, and now we kind of use that to kind of shave it down, tweak it, change up some of the verbiage of what usually lands from an AI perspective.
That's awesome. I think Perplexity, I've heard our sellers say that that's been a huge benefit to them as well as they're thinking about what to send and summarization. So it's great to hear your team is benefiting from that as well.
Yeah.
Well, Kristin, thank you so much for joining us on Go-to-Market AI today. I did really enjoy this demo. I learned a ton, so I appreciate you being here, and thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for all the time.